Hi, welcome to the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have a doctor on my show. Welcome, Dr. Elder.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Dr. Elder is the assistant director of training for psychology, and he has his own private practice. SugarValleyTherapy.com is the website if you want to check it out. He's got some cool things on the website, and you can kind of read about what he thinks about PTSD and some other things. So Dr. Elder and I are going to talk about a couple of different things today, but we're going to start off with talking about PTSD and how that relates to the LGBTQ plus community. So can you kind of give us an overview of what that means? So I know a lot of people, when they think of PTSD, maybe they're thinking about post-war only, and they're not thinking about other things like that. But what do you kind of define PTSD with the LGBTQ community is?
So let's start. I want to talk a little bit about minority stress.
Okay.
And so sexually diverse, gender diverse people are significantly more likely than straight cisgender people to have mental health issues because of minority stress. And to be clear, that's not because LGBTQ plus people are inherently genetically or biologically more likely to have mental health problems, but because of cultural and legal prejudice. This constant stress on sexually diverse, gender diverse people takes a toll on coping and managing emotions and creates differences in health. And so minority stress, or LGBTQ stress, is a model that refers to this chronic stress that being LGBTQ has on our marginalized social status and mental health. And this stress begins usually early in life. You know, you might have more gender non-conforming interests or behaviors which can lead to parent rejection or peer rejection, and then more depression or anxiety or other problems. And you know, keeping your sexual orientation or your gender identity a secret, constant expectation of being rejected, and this sense that you're less important or less healthy than other people.
And do you think that it's getting easier for kids or people to come out now? You know, I know it's a weird time with an election cycle coming up, and that's one of the things that are being talked about the legislation that's coming out with the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ plus. But do you feel like overall, like that people in the world are moving more to being more accepting of people coming out?
This is such a great question, and really a surprising answer.
Okay.
Which is that sexual gender minorities still report higher rates of depression and anxiety, especially in adolescence and adulthood. More substance use, more PTSD, more OCD, more schizophrenia and psychotic symptoms and personality disorders and health outcomes and suicidality. And, interestingly, this is not getting better. These rates have remained stable, and in fact, mental health rates are increasing within all sexual orientation and gender diversity groups, including cisgender and heterosexual people. But mental health issues are the most severe for trans and gender nonconforming individuals who are experiencing overwhelming anxiety and depressive symptoms, which have gotten worse by about 18% since 2008. So it may seem paradoxical. I mean, it does to me that rates are getting worse, given that, you know, there are more accepting attitudes towards sexually and gender diverse people, and more healthcare professionals are developing programs and outreach. But and there have been improvements. You know, younger generations are coming out earlier than any others, and live in a world that many of those in generations before us, you know, could not even imagine. There was marriage equality in 2015 and 2020. The Employment Discrimination Act was declared, you know, by the Supreme Court. It's unconstitutional. In 1973, homosexuality was taken out of the DSM. And 70% of people in 1973 said that homosexuality was wrong. And in 2022, the same number, 71% of Americans supported same-sex marriage.
Yes, yeah.
So we've had this huge turn, but rates seem to be getting worse. And it may be that because people are coming out earlier, you're exposed to these stressors at a younger age. You may not have the social support or the mental health skills necessary. You might, in adolescence, gender norms and being heterosexual is seen as really important. And, although people are experiencing fewer victimization experiences, those experiences are worse. So,
and do you think social media is making it easier or harder for people that are LGBTQ plus? And I think my question is, I think about whenever I was growing up, and if I would have had social media back then, I think it might have been kind of horrible. And because, like, I think
I can imagine it would have been horrible too.
Yeah, and I just think about just how kids are such bullies and stuff, and with social media, and for people to be able to hide behind it and to say whatever they want. I think that I'm not sure if that makes it easier for people because it gives them an outlet to express themselves, but they also have to deal with kind of all the trolls or the people that are backlashing at them and talking about them or being bullies online.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think there are a couple. It's a dynamic situation, right? The more time we spend in social media, the less time we spend in our lives. And we know on some level that we're seeing things that are not representative of reality. But I think the longer we spend dissociated from our lives, sort of from kind of a mindfulness perspective, you're not present in your life. You're not experiencing, you're not hearing, smelling, tasting, touching things that are going on that are within your control. You are someplace else. It's like playing video games or, doing other shopping, things that distract you momentarily in the short term from pain. I think social media has just become sort of another emotional avoidance strategy.
Yeah.
One thing that is cool about social media is the talk about mental health and the ability to find community. Demand.
You can find your group. You can find your group. Your people. I guess in some way or another. That's
such a consistent finding. The community buffers these stressors, can hopefully create community connectedness, a sense of belonging and social support, which can decrease thoughts of suicide and be a protective factor in mental health. LGBTQ community is still important to sexual minority people. It will always be important to sexual minority people.
And do you hear a lot of parents still to this? And I know the answer to this. I think is it still as common for if a child comes out to their parents that a parents, no matter how old the child is, will say, "You got to get out." Is that something that's still happening as much as it did, let's say, 15, 20 years ago?
No, not as much as it has.
Okay, good.
15, 20 years ago. There are so many fantastic researchers across the country that have created pamphlets and resources and websites for parents and families from a range of different religious denomination backgrounds and racial and ethnic minority backgrounds. People can access information and have questions answered. I think the lack of information was part of the difficulty. I really, Dan Savage is such an interesting guy, and there are things that I really admire about some of his advice. And a thing he's always said about coming out is that you need to give people a year to learn more. And it can be helpful for the sexual or gender diverse person to provide additional information and allow the person to ask all of their questions. After the year, if they still are insensitive and rejecting, then you are, I think, within your range, to set up, important boundaries with those people. But I guess what I'm saying is, no, family members are more supportive.
Good.
But
it is still happening.
But it is still happening. And we know so much about, even just having one person, even if it's not your parent, that believes in you and offers you support can significantly cut your risk for mental health issues.
And is it important, for people that are coming out or transitioning or whatever the case may be, I think I read something that was on your website or one of the articles or something that you've written about how important it is for that person to be heard. And is that something that you can kind of talk a little bit about and maybe that's exactly what you said. You have one person, that's all you need sometimes in order to tell your story. Is that, or do they need a community or what's the best way for someone to be heard?
That's a really good question. Feeling socially connected, feeling heard is an essential human need at all stages of life. And we give and receive hundreds of subtle reminders of connectedness in day-to-day life, sometimes without being aware of it. You smile. When you make eye contact with someone, you move over on a bench to make room for someone. You offer assistance. And those interactions remind us that we belong to a community. And those connections aren't available to someone who's stigmatized. And you may anticipate that because there are some people in the world who consider you abnormal or unworthy, you approach all people with caution, and you learn to fend for yourself, and you may learn to over-monitor your speech or where you go or what you do. And there is, more and more research that indicates that even if there's no one single stressor, living with this chronic unsafety can profoundly influence mental and physical health. But having a group of people who you check in with regularly, who you share life events with, who you text and call or spend time with, the more social support and the more community, the better. Our brains are wired for social connection. They benefit from these social connections, and we live healthier, happier, longer lives. So even if you have one person, nurture that one relationship. Yeah.
And how do people that have gone through, the trauma of coming out to their family and, their family abandoned them or, treated them horribly, and how do they what do you do to help them kind of get past that PTSD of what they experienced younger in life? And is it always with them, or can they get past it?
It is not always with them. Although you cannot take away those experiences or make someone forget them, you can learn to respond to them with less and less emotional intensity by talking about and emotionally processing. There was an interesting study in 2014 where mental health providers who mostly work with LGBTQ plus individuals were asked, what are the major changes you see people making in therapy? And there were 6 major changes they saw. 1, recognizing their mental health symptoms were a response to oppression and not an indication of personal deficiencies. These aren't your fault as a result of life experiences. 2, you're not inferior to other people. Changing these messages that, even though you've been rejected in the past, you're still lovable, valid, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. 3, assertiveness training. It's interesting. We do not learn to express ourselves or ask for the things that we want. We spend so much time concealing our identity and trying to pass and stay under the radar that it's important for us to learn to say no and build a new life where our needs are met. Learning that we're resilient, learning how to have healthy relationships, learning how our identities effect.
And are you helping couples as well kind of get through, do you do couples therapy, or are you, and kind of help couples get through past traumatic issues that they may have had?
I do. I love working with couples where one of the spouses or both of the spouses have a history of trauma, or this chronic minority stress, learning skills that improve problem solving and communication. Communication, of course, is the number one thing. Seek therapy, but also to learn how to ask for things while improving the relationship, or at least not harming the relationship, and keeping each other safe, and recognizing when things are starting to get out of control, and taking yourself out for a little bit of a timeout, and coming back in. That's, I think, it's interesting. I think that for so long, having marriage was a privilege, and now that we have access to marriage, I don't think that we're learning how to do relationships. We've always done relationships.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
But we have, we benefit from so many other legal protections. I think that now's a wonderful time to learn how to have a healthy, happy relationship.
Yeah.
And nothing arguably is going to impact your health and your happiness more than being married. Happily married people live longer, and mostly because your spouse makes you go and get health care, and it's a nag. But we also love them for that.
So you have before we started the podcast, you talked about you have a 21-year-old child.
I do.
And we also talked about, so first of all, tell me about your child. Like, how did you decide that you wanted to adopt? And tell me the story about that, because I think that's so interesting.
So, we came in contact with a foster son when he was 16 years old.
Okay.
And started to spend more and more time with him, and he then moved in with us, and we were able to finish out his high school with him, and now he's entering his senior year of college. He is at Texas State studying psychology.
Awesome.
I thought psychology was going to be just sort of a space holder while he figured out what he wanted to do, and told him, the old joke, what's the difference between a pizza and someone with a psychology bachelor's degree? A pizza can feed a family of 4. I said, if you're going to get a bachelor's degree, you're going to have to be really committed to getting a graduate degree in something else. Yeah. But he has found he really loves psychology, and it's helped him to figure out a lot of things about himself. He's such an observant young man, and I, as a gay man, went back and forth myself about whether or not I wanted to ever have children, and fostered children at some point earlier, and that didn't work out. Didn't love the experience, frankly, but also, family members took over their care, which was also great. Seeing a family reunified is also really beautiful, but this opportunity just sort of fell into my lap, and he just got his driver's license for shopping for cars. There are pros and cons. Yeah. But I am very lucky.
And are you in a relationship?
I am. I have a partner, and we've been dating for about a year.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm now divorced, and but it's been a beautiful thing to start a new relationship.
Okay, because I have a lot of listeners, and you're a good-looking doctor, and I felt like if you weren't in a relationship, I was going to be the one that could find you one through one of my listeners. So.
I appreciate you. You're creating community for me. I appreciate it.
So if this relationship doesn't work out, you have my number now, and just call me, and we will do a podcast episode, and we will find you somebody new.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much.
The other thing we talked about before the podcast started was that you have a gay brother, which I do as well. So tell me the story how you kind of found out that your brother was gay, because you said that you didn't know growing up, and did he know about you?
I mean, I think that I was the sort of more gender nonconforming brother, and he was the brother who kind of flew under the radar.
Okay.
And he's now an actor. But when I was speaking of lacking assertiveness, I think in my high school years, I was so nervous about making people upset. And he was very courageous. And when he left high school, he went to a small college and came out. And there is a time and place to say, whether or not this makes you uncomfortable, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated very much his kind of his willingness to be uncomfortable and make other people in our family uncomfortable, and he he led the way, which I really appreciate.
Oh, so did he come out first, or did you he came out before you did?
He did come out
okay
first.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. He's 2 years younger. I think we were raised in a religious family, and I really I had, I think, more struggles related to kind of reconciling that religious identity, and figuring out how to move forward, carrying the parts of my faith or my spirituality, maybe what I would, and I think he was able to resolve that a little bit more easily. And so as long as we get to the top of the mountain, there are lots of ways up that mountain.
Awesome. And so you said your brother also he did surrogacy for a baby, so he's living his full authentic life as well, it sounds like.
We have really fantastic parents.
And your parents, I guess, they accepted the both of you being gay?
They did. They've been really wonderful. We've been very, fortunate to have parents who, I'll never, my dad, when I came out to him, my dad graduated high school, was, raised in a rural part of Utah, raised, mostly in farming communities. And, he looked at me and said, "I love you, and we'll figure this out."
That's awesome. That is so great.
Yeah.
I mean, what more could you ask for?
What more could you ask for? It's so true. I say to parents now, if they ever ask, I say, your child will always be asked how you responded when you came out, when they came out. So make this good. Make this memorable.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just kind of going back to some of the patients that you see, are you seeing more people that are transgender now, that they are, because people are feeling maybe more comfortable with it? Are you seeing more of that where you're helping people kind of get past that kind of PTSD as well?
That's a good question. I do some evaluations for gender affirming surgery, because in the United States you still have to get permission, or you still have to get an approval letter, a recommendation letter following an assessment, and I do that work and really enjoy that.
That's awesome.
But I think although gender diverse and trans patients have so many difficulties, many of them come into mental health without, transition as their primary concern. At this point, they've maybe transitioned and they have anxiety related to having anxiety. And it's impossible to, completely sort through what's minority stress and what's anxiety. But I've also learned that a patient who is trans may not be coming in because they're trans. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it's a mistake to imagine. Not that you are suggesting this, but I, in my own growth, have realized that just because someone's trans, they may be coming in or something completely unrelated. Not completely unrelated, but that is peripheral to
They could
that
have
identity.
Same issues as a person that's a complete heterosexual person. They could be coming for the similar type thing. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's not always about their identity or who they how they're feeling about it. So that's a really good point. Do you have patients though that when they come in that you don't feel that they should go through the entire transition, or do you, if they get to the point to you where you're signing off on it, you feel like they deserve to do it at this point?
Who am I to stand in the way of someone's best self-knowledge? They are the experts on themselves. And if they have to access legal protections through me, I am happy to provide them for them.
Do you think it's odd, though, that they still have to go through and get sign-off for this? I mean, it seems a little dated to me.
Of course it is. Yes. I mean, to have to be diagnosed with a mental illness in order to get access to gender-affirming surgery, I can't imagine, if we as gay men or bi men had to get a letter saying that we really were gay or bi in order to get married. It would feel pretty demeaning.
Did you think when you were growing up that we would ever have, you reference gay marriage and having, these rights that normal heterosexual people, normal, and I say it in quotes, have? Did you ever think growing up that we would, as gay men, would have these type of privileges, I guess is what people would call them, that they've granted us these privileges? But I mean, really, that we have equal rights as a heterosexual people or couples. Did you ever think that would be something when you were growing up that would happen?
I honestly did not. And I didn't anticipate that it would happen so fast.
Yeah.
I will never forget watching in 2013 when my home state of Utah passed, marriage equality. It was so crazy. I could not believe it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how long it would last. It seemed too good to be true.
Interesting.
I knew that I was living through something, one of those flashbulb memories that I would always, consider. And also because norms change in the country by what is legal and is illegal. And I knew that as a result of this simply being legal, there would be so much social change.
Yeah.
And so, I knew that as I was watching legal same-sex marriage, I knew that I was going to also be watching the country change in the way that they saw, gay and bi and lesbian, trans, married individuals. So what about you? What was that experience like for you?
Well, so I agree with what you said whenever you're like, this is something that couldn't be, that may not last, right? Because that was like, so I was living in New York City at the time, and we would go to Cape Cod, to Provincetown, every summer, and it was legal in Massachusetts, but nowhere else, or at least it wasn't in New York at the time, or Miami, wherever we were living. And so when we got to Provincetown, we walked by the town hall, and my boyfriend at the time, said, so I guess we were together, well, we've been together since 1998, so
wow,
whenever that was, 2000, we got married in 2007, so we were together for 9 years, and he said, I think we should get married. And I said, what? Like, we're here with my two best friends, and there's nobody else. Our other friends aren't here. Our families aren't here. Like, why? And he's a lawyer. He went to school to be a lawyer, and what he basically said is that from a legal standpoint, we need to do it, because if they take it away, at least we have it, and then maybe we'd get grandfathered in or something. Never thinking that years later it would be a federally available marriage game, or same-sex couples could get married federally. We never thought that. So we walked into the town hall. I said, we can go ask about it. we walked in. They said, okay, you got to sign this, and you have a 3-day wait list. You have a 3 days where you can like make sure that you want to do this, and if you do, go get a justice of the peace or somebody to do the wedding for you, and then have them sign it and bring it back, and you get your marriage certificate. So when we walked in, I said, oh my God, like this feels right. Like this feels like we should do it. And so something sparked in me, and I'm like, it's not just for the legal reason. And he felt the same way. And we got married at Pilgrim's Landing, which is supposedly where the first pilgrims landed. And it was just me and my husband and the justice of the peace and my two good friends. And we stood there. I got married in jeans and nice shirts, and it was not at all what I thought my wedding would be like. And we talked about doing a wedding. We've talked about doing weddings many times, but I just don't want to spend $200,000 on a party for people. So I'm like, I'd rather invest that in my retirement or my house or whatever. So we just never did it. So, and we told our parents, and I think both of our parents probably weren't super happy with us because we just kind of did this. It's like we eloped in a way. But that's how we did it. And that's, and I think also we've had friends that have said to us many, many times that have a party. You've given gifts to us for all of our multiple weddings, because some of our friends have been married more than once, and baby showers and bar mitzvahs and bod mitzvahs and everything else that we've been to and give gifts. And like, we haven't been able to do anything for you. So there was this episode of Sex and the City where Carrie Bradshaw, I don't know if you remember this episode, where she walked in and she like registered for Manolo Blahniks or something because she was so tired of giving us stuff. So I said, one day we'll go to like Bergdorf Goodman, or we'll go to Neiman Marcus or something. We'll register and send it out to everybody so everybody can buy us our wedding gifts. So, but that's how we did it. And we did it, and we did it because we loved each other. And I guess my hesitancy at the beginning was because we didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it because there wasn't enough people there that could witness it. And I always had in my head that you needed to have that 200 people wedding and stuff. But having just the 5 of us there was what we needed. So,
isn't it interesting? Like there is something kind of freeing about being non-traditional.
Yeah.
There is something that allows you to choose to do it for different reasons. You can do it because you're in love and because it feels like the right moment, and not because your mom wants you to have a day where she can be the star. Like you don't have to have a party for 200 people.
Yeah.
You can wander into a courtroom and I hope that watching sexually diverse people get married has inspired some, heterosexual people to get married.
Yeah.
In situations that are most congruent with their personalities, and to sort of buck some norms too.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful story about you and your spouse celebrating a legal right, your friendships, and the continuity of your relationship. It almost, because you had already committed to one another, this was a formalization of that commitment, but it wasn't the commitment.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
And I think that there's something really beautiful about approaching marriage as, okay, this is the legal part, but this other part was very private and personal and happened with time. And this is just sort of the part where we're making a legal binding covenant with one another in the government. But I admire that was your story. And that
do you want to get married one day?
I would love to get married one day. Yes.
Okay.
I think that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
And would you want a big traditional wedding, or you're not sure? Or would you want to just kind of do like what we did and go to the courthouse, or what would your ideal wedding be?
I think that my ideal wedding would be something very, very small.
Okay.
With just some friends and family.
Yeah.
And kind of, a fun night where we all told stories and stayed up late talking, and maybe did it at a house or someplace else with kind of like a cozy vibe, and it felt like we were at a big round table talking about our lives and marking this moment.
That actually sounds really great. So maybe that's what we'll do one day. At one point before COVID, I was almost talked into doing something, and then COVID came and I got out of it, so I didn't have to spend all the money. But we were talking about kind of going. So we have friends in LA, we have friends in New York, we have kind of friends all over the country, and we were talking about let's go to a different city. And instead of having everybody come to wherever we would get married, Provincetown or some destination, let's just go to people's different city and host like a big dinner there in each of these cities. So we thought about doing that, and then COVID hit and it kind of like killed the plan. But we see our friends enough, and there's other occasions to celebrate. So we'll wait for the next wedding of our friends, because I'm sure somebody will be next.
Thank you for going ahead and for showing the way. 2008. That's a foundational marriage.
Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't think, the night we met, I knew that we were together forever. So it's kind of like bizarre. So, and the interesting thing is both of our parents were together, so their entire marriage. So I think that it just kind of was ingrained in us that that's how we were brought up. So it just being brought up with two families that weren't divorced is not typical anymore. So
but there was a sense that you would make this decision and that you would stick together and you would commit to one another and work on improving yourself and the relationship.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I've had a great time, and if you do have that wedding, give me a call. Let me know where you're registered.
Yes, and let me tell you, like I said, I think if this year relationship doesn't work out, please call me. I have friends that I can think of that would be more than happy to probably move to San Antonio, Texas, or have you move with them, whatever. So
You've made my month. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Be sure to visit Dr. Elder's website, sugarvalleytherapy.com. And if you want to know more about him, that's the best place to find out. So thank you so much for being on, Dr. Elder.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.